Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are, to everyone here. Welcome to Ask a Marketing Recruiter Anything, the inside track on hiring marketing leaders. I'm your hostess, Jaime Bergstrom, Executive Senior Partner and Accounting and Finance Practice Lead at Talentfoot Executive Search. Thank you so much for joining us today for this very special event. For everyone in the audience, to give us a better understanding of who is with us today, it would be very helpful if you could drop your title, industry, and city in the chat as we begin. I also want to encourage all of you to actively use the chat throughout our time together, and I'll do my very best to follow the questions and address them at the end of today's conversation. So please be sure to enter your questions as we go, and definitely stick around for the Q&A session. For those who may not be familiar with Talentfoot, our mission is to future-proof organizations by helping them hire forward-thinking leaders who have a track record of accelerating growth, innovation, and profitability. From the manager level to the C-suite, we recruit for startups to Fortune 50 with a strong specialty in the lower mid-market organization. So why are we here today? Many of the senior marketers we work with ask what they can do to continually push the limits and position themselves as marketing leaders who are ready to take the next step in their career. Similarly, the hiring managers we partner with are asking for a new breed of marketer, one who's a true technologist at heart and who can drive revenue, growth, and increased efficiency. That's why I'm pleased to be joined by someone who is helping both professionals take the next step in their career and organizations hire their next marketing leader. With that said, I am pleased to introduce Amanda Kelly. Amanda is an executive senior partner here at Talentfoot and marketing search specialist. Amanda, can you give us some insight into your background and tenure at Talentfoot?
Yeah, thank you, Jaime. So I have 14 years of experience recruiting marketing leaders. I'm based in Chicago, and I've hired individuals all over the country across a variety of industries. And I specialize at the director level and above. And we really pride ourselves on taking a consultative approach to both understanding my clients' needs as well as understanding what candidates are looking for. I really want to make sure that I make the best match that will benefit everyone and really drive success.
That's amazing. And congratulations on all of your success. Now let's get started with some of the questions that were sent in advance. Amanda, to start off, looking back at 2024, what hiring trends have you seen in the marketing landscape?
Yeah, so 2024 has been another unique year. Last year, we saw a lot of layoffs across industries, and companies really slowed down on hiring leaders for the organizations. So I saw some more hiring at the director and below level versus that VP and above. So with continuing into 2024, we've definitely seen continued layoffs, but luckily, I do feel like we had an uptick on that VP and above hiring again. I actually read that 1 in 3 marketers say layoffs have occurred on the marketing team at their organizations. So because of that, I think a lot of teams are pretty strapped, wearing a lot of hats, and there's a lot more competition now for new roles that are being opened up. There's more leaders out there looking, and then there's the people that stayed at their organizations that weren't part of a layoff, but like I said, they're really, spread thin. So they're also looking for new roles. So I just think there's been a lot more competition in 2024 for the roles that are open. But luckily there really has been a lot more leadership roles available at that VP and C level this year as compared to last. So that's been a really positive trend. And I've also seen a lot of CMOs taking on fractional roles instead, while they're looking for that right full-time role for themselves. On average, I've heard that it takes about 3 months to land a new role when you are looking. So that fractional work is a really great option in the meantime for yourself.
Mhm.
And then another thing I noticed just with the roles I worked on this year so far is that a lot of the roles were VP of marketing or head of marketing roles that were the first of the kind to their organization. So these individuals are reporting directly to the CEO or founder, which means there isn't a C level there. So what that suggests to me is that there's just been a little bit less hiring at the CMO level and in favor of that VP. And I think there's a couple reasons organizations might do this. So first of all, it just might be they have a lower budget for the salary. And And then on the positive side, though, then that leader, when they come into the organization, they're going to have more longevity there because there'll be more room for them to grow into that C level. Um, and then I think most companies, I would say all of our clients say they want a leader that's going to roll up their sleeves, be strategic, but be willing to kind of dig into some of that day to day. And often it's believed that that C level is a little bit removed from the day to day. So I would say, my suggestion is that it's really important for all marketing leaders just to be willing to get a little involved in that day to day. It really gives them more insight into the business and what their team needs. And I would just say that a continued trend is that marketers just continue to wear a lot of hats these days.
Oh, that's interesting. I could easily see that. Some great observations and statistics for this year. Now, on to our next question. For hiring managers, particularly CMOs, determining the critical skills needed for their marketing teams requires a strategic approach that balances both current team capabilities and future organizational goals. What is the best way hiring managers can determine the critical skills for their roles?
I think when you're thinking about hiring for your team, it can definitely be overwhelming, especially if it is a brand new role that you haven't had before. So, a good place to start is, evaluate your current team. What is their skill set? How many years of experience does the team have? What are their needs? You're looking for, are there just gaps in that skill set? Or does this team, are they junior? Do they need a lot of mentoring? So you'll be thinking a little bit more about just the makeup of the team. And then you'll think about just the long-term goals of the company. Where do we need to go? And how is marketing going to support you in achieving those goals? So after you think about that, then you can back into the skill set from there. So for example, if your goal is to expand existing business, you'll want to hire a marketer that has led in a sales-driven environment. And they've got proven experience implementing strategy to cross-sell and upsell. So that will help to increase that growth with their accounts. Or if your goal is just to raise awareness of your brand, you'll want to be looking for a marketer with more of a brand marketing background. So I'd say a lot of what we're doing is, we're looking at what are those critical skills and then hiring candidates that have achieved some of those goals before so they can bring their playbook. And then, they've already implemented these strategies so they can come right in and get going.
Awesome. Great suggestions and perspective. Now, before we head into our next questions, let's go to the audience. What's one critical skill you're working on developing to advance your career? You can drop your answers in the chat. Now, back to you, Amanda. Once the essential skills are identified, how does the candidate highlight those skills in their resume, and how can they truly stand out in an interview?
I think when you're thinking about writing your resume, you want to think about it sort of from how a recruiter or a hiring team is finding your resume. So you'll want to think about it from a keyword perspective. So, infuse those different keywords into your resume. You could look at the job description, for example, and you might see, oh, they call out SEO, they call it demand generation, paid search, whatever those hard skills are, and make sure whatever you have experience in, you've got that in your resume.
Mhm.
And then also just having a list. I often see people put in their resume a list of the technology they have experience with. So maybe it's Salesforce or, HubSpot. It's just good to have a little list there because that's also a search term teams may be using to find out if you've got experience with the type of, CRM system they have at their organization. So you can start with that. And then, you can tailor your resume to that exact job as well. So sometimes a lot of my candidates will have several different versions of their resume, depending on what
Mhm.
type of role they're applying for. And I think that's really smart.
Great idea.
That way you can just showcase, the strengths of your experience as it relates to that role. And then you always want to make sure, though, just to list out job responsibilities, that's, not going to cut it. You really need to be showing what is your success, what have you achieved in that organization, and you have to use metrics to show that success. I think, over and over, we are looking for data-driven marketers, and so if you don't have data on your resume, then it looks like, you're not someone who's really achieving that success. So you want to just jot down all of that too, like throughout your job, and keep your resume up to date, because sometimes it can be really hard to go backwards after 4 years, and you don't know what those metrics are. So it's great to just kind of jot that down and keep your resume updated, even if you're not actively looking.
Great idea.
Yeah, so that really helps on the resume side. And then, when you're in that interview, to really stand out, I always say, like, you got to start simple. Just do a lot of research on the company, review their website, read any recent news on the company, check out their social media channels. If it happens to be a company that, they sell a product in a store, go to the store, check out the product. Just be really familiar. I think that's such a good place to start, because then as you're looking at all of that, I think it jogs your own memory of, oh, I've got really relevant experience. I can see things that they're doing. I've also done that before. Or, maybe you see some holes and you say, oh, they really should be doing this. And that really helps you just develop your own opinion. And, don't be afraid to share that in the interview. I think that can really help you stand out, because it shows that you've got confidence. It shows that you have a point of view. And it shows that you've done your research. So I think that's always a really good way to stand out the interview. And then, of course, you got to be very concise. People that are rambling on and not to the point, that usually kind of loses the interviewer. So you just really want to make sure that you are communicating effectively, because, as a marketing leader, that's something you're going to need to do to lead an organization, lead a team. So that's always important.
Mhm.
And then I'd say, my last tip is really, the most important in terms of just for anyone at any level. You just really want to go into it with a few examples of strategies you've developed. Just go to examples that you can think of right away. So, a strategy you developed, how you executed it, what were the results. Really talk through that beginning to end of how you developed it, and what kind of success you achieved. And maybe even if you've got an example that where you didn't achieve the success you were hoping for, what did you learn from it? How did you pivot? So just having a couple of those types of examples are going to be really helpful. And that's where you can also quote those metrics that I mentioned, that are going to be on your resume. You can quote those to just show what growth you achieved, and that you're proud of yourself for the work you've done.
I love that. Yeah, I agree. While obviously I focus mainly within our accounting and finance practice, I feel that interview preparation is so important across all functional areas, as you noted. I always tell candidates to control what you can control. And that's how much time and effort you put into preparing yourself for the interview by coming in confident and knowing why you're interested in the organization, the position, and how their background is aligned for the role will set them up for success. To be present, an active participant during the interview by having great questions and examples already top of mind.
Mhm.
Now, as a follow-up to that question, what do you feel are the biggest interview red flags hiring managers should be concerned about most?
I think the biggest one I've always heard, and I even experience this when I'm screening candidates, is if the candidate is really negative, I mean, you get discounted right away. So I know we've all, if you've been through a layoff or something happened where you came into the role and it wasn't what you thought it was going to be, you weren't given what you were promised. Like, people don't feel great about that. But unfortunately, in an interview, not a great time to start kind of complaining, being negative. So you can work with your recruiter on the best way to explain why you left the role without it. Yes, we want to be honest, but you don't want to be overly negative. So we can always help you sort of tell that story in a way that doesn't show that you're complaining, but just showing how you're taking control of the situation and moving forward. Um, I'd say too, just if you're too vague with your examples, like I just mentioned, how you want to tell that story from beginning to end. If you're too vague and you're not mentioning, like, oh, the specifics of how you thought of it or what the results were, the interviewers kind of left not really knowing what impact you made. So that's another one. And then too, just but not being succinct, like I said too. Like, if you're just rambling, and not letting the other person talk and ask the next question, then they probably start thinking about something else and they're not even listening to you. So definitely, make sure you're answering the question and then stopping and waiting to see if they have anything else to say.
Yeah, these are great. And I think they carry over to all functional areas too.
Mhm.
Well, now let's shift gears and talk about a very trending and relevant topic when hiring hybrid versus remote. What are the current trends in hybrid versus remote, and what should both hiring managers and candidates expect when it comes to flexibility in work arrangements?
Yeah, so obviously this has been a big topic of discussion the past couple of years. I would say starting last year is when most companies were really starting to return to office and figure out what is the best balance there.
Mhm.
Um, and then now in 2024, I would say I think like 90% of my clients have been in the office from a 2 to 5 days a week. Fewer on the 5 days, but the 2 to 3 seems to be the norm.
Mhm.
There are still some fully remote roles, though. I've seen that more in the tech industry. And then I also have seen where, there might be a lot of the team members in that headquartered office, but when they're hiring at VP and C level, because those are just more difficult to find the right talent, they might be more open to that level being remote, but then with frequent travel. So, I think every company is doing a little bit different, but in my experience, at least, the majority right now are on that hybrid schedule. And then, interestingly, though, I would say, I remember a few years ago when there weren't a lot of remote roles, people would just be like, oh man, if you ever hear about a remote role, you've got to let me know.
Yep.
And then now the switch, because we all did it for so long, now everyone's telling me, I really just want to get back in the office. Like, I don't mind. Like, I really want to be around people. I want to collaborate. So
Yeah.
I think I think I'm happy to hear that people are just, more open and more flexible. And so I think clients and candidates, everyone needs to be a little bit more flexible about how people work best.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And I'm hearing that too, obviously in the accounting and finance side. There's still a blend of all three, in-person, hybrid, and some remote as well. Good. Now back to the audience. What is your preference on a work environment, hybrid or remote? You can drop your answers in the chat. Now, and back to you, Amanda. Now, looking ahead to 2025, the marketing hiring landscape is expected to undergo several key shifts driven by technological advancements, evolving business needs, and changes in work culture. What changes do you foresee in the marketing landscape?
I was thinking about this and just thinking about where we're going next year. And I think the industries that I see in demand, I think e-commerce and retail continue to be big. Um, Obviously, finance and fintech, that's been a big booming industry. But also, this is, I think, a little bit newer. Is like we've seen a lot more in like manufacturing and building, which I thought was really interesting. And
Hmm.
then also just continued in healthcare. Um, that field continues to just evolve and be going through a lot more of a digital transformation. So we've seen a lot more marketers being hired there. And then, if you think about the skills and demand, I think, data driven marketers, like I said before, that is always really the top skill set. We really want analytical marketers that are making decisions based on data. So that really is a continued must have. And then I think with leaders especially, we do want that blend of someone very performance driven, but also still thinking about the brand and the how the brand is being seen across the website and it's sort of that right brain left brain type of person, and that really makes a fantastic marketing leader. And even if you could lean towards more the performance side, and then hire a really great brand person underneath you or vice versa. But I think just really having that larger strategic view across the whole business is that continues to be a big skill and demand. um, and then, of course, just organic and paid social media is such a huge channel to build brand awareness. um, really, SEO and content marketing, those tend to be really big as well. So I think all marketers just they need to be customer first and really help drive the growth of their brand by being aware of all the different channels and that media mix they could bring to the table. And I think too, when I think about just a marketer that, is continuing to grow, just you need to be aware of what those emerging trends are. So just,
Mhm.
be really aware of what's going on in the market, test new technologies, find out what's going on in the industry and just continue to learn and be curious.
That's awesome. I think we're all hoping for some hiring improvements in 2025. I
Mhm,
think we've seen some momentum right across the board, building already. Just hopefully it will continue.
mhm.
Um, all right, on to our next question. What tips do you have on choosing the right recruiting partner and making the most of the relationship to ensure long-term success?
Right. Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think a lot of people wonder how best to work with a recruiter, and I think on the hiring manager side, you'll want to choose a recruiting partner that really you feel like you can develop a good rapport with. And I think the best thing to do is probably talk to a couple different recruiters and just understand their style and kind
Mhm.
of see if you gel when you're speaking with them, because honestly, to have a good partnership, there is a lot of trust that goes into this. So um, lots of communication. And I think for me personally, I really love when my clients are just being really open with me. Tell me what you like, tell me what you don't like. I mean, that's what's going to help me really find the right candidate for you. So I think
Yep.
that's why it's great to just interview a couple firms, see who you just gel with. And you really want to hire a recruiter too that specializes in that field that you are hiring in. So, um, these are really critical roles when you're hiring that, a CMO. You want to hire a firm that has hired other similar CMOs before, have worked in those industries. So they're really going to be able to be more consultative with you, and
Mhm.
that's really what we do at Talentfoot is we help our clients hire these roles into their organizations, and we take that deep dive into to your needs to help you develop what that skill set is. So we really want to make sure you're hiring for the right role to meet the needs that you have. So um, I think that's, for the hiring manager, just really look at a couple different firms and find who will work best with your needs. And then
Mhm.
I think for the candidate, when you're looking for a new role, similarly, you should also work with a couple recruiters. One thing I was thinking about is, let's say if you are someone who's looking for a remote role, you'll want to talk to a couple different recruiters like across the country then, because they're going to be in the different markets representing different companies that a recruiter in Chicago may not have. You just never know. So I think it's great to talk to a couple different ones, and then um, a lot of us do work on roles exclusively too. So, one recruiter is working with a company that another one is not. So I think it is good to have a couple that you develop relationships with and just keep in touch and be open to hearing about what's out there. That'll really help you develop that relationship with that recruiter. And again, just there's a lot of communication that goes on here. So be honest with them about what you're looking for.
Mhm.
I take all that information and I really use that, to help match you up with the right role. So
Good. This has been amazing. Now let's go to some questions from the audience. Our first question is from Marla Miller, who unfortunately couldn't join us today, but was hoping you could answer the question, how do you overcome ageism?
yeah, this is always a tough question because I've definitely heard from some of my candidates that have struggled with this. So, I think first of all, just be patient. I think
Good.
um, obviously you've got some great experience, and the roles that require that depth of experience, there's not as many of them.
Yeah.
Obviously there's always going to be a lot of manager level roles and a lot of specialist level roles, but that VP and above, there's just less of those, and so you do need to be patient. And like I just was talking about with like how candidates can work with recruiters, you work with a couple different recruiters in a couple different locations where, like I said, we're all working on different things. So keep up those relationships and then utilize your network. The connections you've made throughout your career are going to be so critical to you to help. They could introduce you to maybe the hiring manager at their company. They could connect you to somebody else that you don't know. I think that'll really help just making sure you're getting out there and talking to people. And I think too, just I also said this earlier, just make sure you know what's going on in the industry. I think this is great for everybody, whether or not you're more experienced or less experienced, but the more knowledgeable you are about the industry, technology, what's going on, that can really help you just facilitate conversations with new people and maybe, put more comments on LinkedIn, really build your brand presence. Just getting out there that's just the number one way to continue to get in touch with other people and just become aware of opportunities for you.
Yeah, that's so true. Another audience question. As a candidate, how do you find good recruiters to help you out in your search?
So I think you could definitely ask some of your friends, your network, ask them what recruiters they've had good experiences with. I think that's a great place to start is just getting some
Okay.
referrals, right?
Yep.
And then, I often, I'll have, since I just focus in marketing, I'll have some of my candidates even ask me, like, hey, Amanda, do you know of any good recruiters in law? My husband's a lawyer, needs a new job. And so, I think it's totally fine just to ask around and ask people if they know of anyone. Um, and then, of course, you can Google it, see what comes up.
Right?
Um,
LinkedIn is always good.
yeah, and I think at Talentfoot we are more of a boutique firm, and then there's also larger firms out there that have some more generalists. And I would say talk to both,
Yep.
um, get in touch and talk to those recruiters and like I said earlier, see if you kind of jive with them, see if you feel like you can trust them and have good communication.
Yeah, communication is key. Another one that just came in. How important is machine learning and or data science understanding for marketing roles?
That's interesting. I would say, in some of the reading I was just doing, that machine learning is actually a pretty hot area. So I think it's probably just dependent on what type of companies you are, looking at, and how important that's going to be at that organization.
Mhm.
So I think continuing though to, like I said, just be really aware of any new up and coming technologies and how you can. I know I see a lot of people here talking about AI. So,
Yeah.
similarly, it's just being aware of anything new out there and how can I then incorporate that into my role to be more efficient, to drive results. Try it. If it doesn't work for your organization, then that's fine. But I think as marketers, I think you all are really big into the test and learn, and so I think it's good to just be aware of how all of that can help your role.
Good. So true. What's the first place people should start if looking for a new job?
That's a good question. I think the first place is get your resume up to snuff, probably, right?
Yep.
Um, really make sure it's updated with some of those tips I mentioned. Have some friends look at it, proofread it. Um, and then another thing I think to look at is go ahead and look at those jobs posted on LinkedIn. But I actually see somebody posted here too. Eric mentioned that every job seems like it has hundreds of applicants. So
Yes.
I agree. So when you look on LinkedIn, you'll see a lot of the time a great job's posted within 24 hours, they've got 400 applicants. So you can
Yeah.
start there to look and see what's open, but I would say then start writing down what are your target companies and then find out if you know anyone at those companies or and this is another way you're utilizing your network is do you know someone who knows someone there, like how could you get introduced? So start there and try to go through those channels to apply versus just apply on LinkedIn with the other 400 people and then not hear back. You've really got to be more proactive. So that's really where I'd start.
Good. This is another good one. What are the common reasons candidates are rejected during the final stages of the interview process?
Hmm. Let's see. I would say recently, in my experience, I've seen people rejected and go with a different candidate when they aren't specific enough. So I said this earlier, like where you really need to be showing your examples. So, throughout that whole process, if you're too vague, that, and someone else is really specific about like how they did something, and it's really like you just don't want to speak too general. You really got to talk about the how. And then as you're getting to that final interview, now you're relating that to this job. So you want to say like, this is how I would come in and help you reach your goals. So if you're too vague there and somebody else is way more specific, they're going to go with the other candidates. So I think
Right.
that's kind of the common thing I've seen.
Yep. No, I agree. Now another one. Should my resume be ATS friendly? And are there good free resume ATS checkers you can recommend?
I see someone put in here about atsfriendlyresume.com. I've never used that before, but I think go
Mhm.
ahead and check. I think that, like I said earlier, if you've got those keywords in your resume, that is going to help. Um, and I would say with really creative, if there's like pictures and stuff on your resume, that may not be ATS friendly. So maybe have those two versions.
Point.
So have one that has less formatting and colors and pictures going on, and then you can have your more creative one too if you'd like. But I think that might be helpful with the ATS.
Good. And I know we touched upon this next one a little bit too, but I'll throw it out there. What's the best way to break through and stand out against hundreds of applicants?
Like I said, you do have to be more proactive. So you can go directly to that hiring manager and send them a note. And one thing with this though is you really got to be a good fit for the role. So make sure you really are reading that job description and you're like, "Oh wow, I've got experience in this industry. I've got that skill set." So send a note to either the hiring manager or that hiring team. Maybe it's the, head of talent acquisition that posted that role. Send them a note and really just point out very succinctly, the three reasons why you're a great fit for the role. That does help you just cut through the clutter. And we
Yeah.
get a lot of emails. I get emails all over my LinkedIn, all over my inbox. I'm getting texts. We get inundated. So when you kind of can cut through the clutter and really show, hey, I've done this before, that's when we're like, oh, great. Let's get on the phone right now and talk. So I think that's the best way to sort of just get through all those other applicants.
Yeah. Another thing I know when I'm partnering with candidates, if it is for a specific organization or if you have a recruiting partner,
Mhm.
I will tell them to tell me, hey, what are you seeing? Sometimes I'll have a warmer contact, right? Or higher level contact, something that, a warmer contact that I might be able to leverage on their behalf too.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think that's what's so great about if you can have a great relationship with your recruiter, let them know. I always tell my candidates, hey, send me like five of your, top companies you'd love to work with. And why not? Why not try to get in and see if I know somebody there or someone else at my company's worked with that company. You don't know what kind of, connections we can help drive for you too. So
Yeah, no, it's so true. And it's all about the partnership.
mhm.
Now, on average, how long is it taking candidates to get a job currently?
So I saw this quote, statistics that I mentioned earlier, that's taking about 3 months. So
Yep.
I will say, some common frustrations I heard from my candidates this summer, though, that they were, in the running for a role that then after 3 months or so, they find out, oh, never mind, the role got put on hold or the scope of the role changed. So now they were no longer a fit. So I do see that happening. Sometimes that is the outlier, but I think you just got to be aware that sometimes that can happen. So if you are really actively looking, don't put your eggs all in one basket. You do want to interview with a few companies and stay active so that it isn't taking way longer than the 3 months.
Yep. No, all good points. Now, what is the best way for a candidate to highlight their marketing technology experience slash skill set on a resume? Should it be in a separate section? Can you provide any insights on formatting?
Yeah, I typically do just see the technology experience and any sort of CRM or any of that experience just listed. Usually, it's at the end, so it's going to be probably after all of your role experience, the education, and then I might see just a little align with those. written out there. I think that's totally fine.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
I do too. I think a separate section, but then I also think, as we've discussed throughout, or you've discussed throughout, making it specific. So if you know a position, it really wants a specific software or, tech savvy, then I will also encourage a candidate to maybe put it in one of the bullets, if it is within their current role or the last position, just so that the reader is well aware of where they've had that experience too.
Yeah, and I was just thinking about a role I worked on earlier this year. We were looking for a marketer that had utilized Zoom Info before for leads. And I found that really interesting because I don't see that listed on a lot of people's resumes. And
Right.
so when I was searching LinkedIn, I definitely put, Zoom Info into my keyword search to see who had that. And it's not a lot of people that are filling that out, but then I would speak to them and they did have that experience. So I think,
Yes.
like we were just said, so if you saw that, if you were applying for a job and you saw that it listed, anything like that, like Zoom Info, and you've got that experience, yeah, put that on your resume so it comes up.
Yeah. No, it's so true. Now, if you're a marketer, what is a reasonable length for a resume?
I think a long time ago we used to say, oh, it can't go over one page. But obviously, if you've got years of experience, if you've got any more than, I don't know, 8 years of experience, I would say it's going to go over one page, right? So,
Yep.
I, 2 pages is great. I think you don't really need to be talking about, every single detail as it goes farther back. So I've
Mhm.
seen some people, they may, their last 3, 4 roles, they'll have more bullet points. And
Mhm.
then after that, they'll say like prior experience from this year to this year and kind of list out much more short bullet points.
Mhm.
Just maybe, one bullet point per job.
No more
Because you don't
needed.
need to go into so much detail for, the first role you had out of college. So
Yeah.
does that
Good.
help?
Well, I'm afraid it's time to wrap up. For everyone who participated and for those that signed up but couldn't make it, you will all receive a recording of this webinar in the coming days. And thank you again for joining us today. I hope it was helpful for both candidates and clients. And thanks again, Amanda, for your valuable insight. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.